Well, today we're talking about the 2008 film Bronson, directed by Nicholas Winding Refn. And I have seen one of his other movies, Drive, which is kind of like, film kid normie movie. I did see it when I was in high school, so about 6 years ago. I'm sure it holds up, I remember good things about it. But Bronson is the second movie I've seen by him. I've heard his stuff is crazy and full of color, energy, just absolute insanity, which Drive dove into, but it was kind of like more accessible from what I remember. But this one was just a portrait of this prisoner, Charles Bronson, played brilliantly by Tom Hardy. And it was just a thrill ride the entire way. Because I feel like sometimes if I sit down to watch a movie, I'm like, all right, so gotta set aside some time to watch this movie. But this one, I felt like I could just put on, and it was just entertaining from the get-go. And I was not worried that I might get bored in the middle. It was just entertaining through and through, and I really, really loved it. And it's clear that it was absolutely carried by Tom Hardy. This is Tom Hardy's best performance. 100%. He is a really great character actor. He's just a weird dude in general. His voices in movies just are so weird, off-putting, and it's makes you question how he should talk in real life. And when you do hear him talk in real life, you're like, that sounds weird. You should be doing a weird accent. And this one is just just this British accent on this absolutely insane prisoner, Charles Bronson, who's based on a real person. And his first name, or his name before he gave himself the name Charles Bronson, was Michael Peterson. And then, he goes to prison for, small crime, like it said in the trailer. And then he just loves prison. And he is dubbed in real life one of the most violent prisoners of all time. And I think this movie, from the get-go, I think the very first scene, so this is spoiler territory. First, I'm just going to talk about the very first scene, which isn't really too much of spoilers, but he's talking to the audience, and he's talking about how he always wanted to be a celebrity. And with that, I think that the movie did such a good job at making him a celebrity and making this movie such a spectacle. And yes, all movies, they're spectacles. They're things you go to be entertained. And this movie specifically, it was very theatrical. And the way it was directed was just, it was so awesome. And it's not trying to be realistic. It's not trying to have the narrative be completely linear. There's a lot of breaks where Bronson is talking to an audience, which is just a faceless mass of British people, which is probably just supposed to be the audience who's watching the movie. And he's just venting his feelings and just showing his character. And the structure of the movie was just absolutely brilliant. I loved it. And so just a few scenes that I wanted to point out in particular that I really, really loved. So we have the scene. There's a very short scene where he's on a train and he's released from prison. And it showed in the trailer where this woman's like, oh, where are you off to? And he's like, oh, I'm going back to London to kill the Queen. And she's like, oh, okay. No, sorry, I completely got that wrong. So in the scene, he's on the train. And it's really all just the little interactions he has with people. He says that, she says, oh, you're going on vacation, on holiday. And he's like, nah, got some things to do. And then she's like, oh, what's that? Oh, got to kill the Queen. And she's like, oh, going to London then. Swell. And it's just she takes no note to oh, he's going to murder the Queen, which he isn't, but she just plays it off so casually. There's so many small interactions in this movie where he's just talking to people. Just the way he talks is incredible. There's the one scene where he's going around in the prison. He's pouring tea for people. And then that one guy who becomes a bigger character later who gets him into fighting, they're in the prison and he gives him a cup of tea. And then he's like, oh, you're big and muscly. And then after he gives him the tea, he just keeps his hands up, his face straight, and he just goes in this position, fighting stance, showing off his muscles. And he just completely embodied the character in those moments. And I mean, the entire movie, but there's just some weird small moments that just stand out that are how did you think of this? This is great. This is phenomenal. When he's in one of the asylums and there's this dance, there's this one character in the front who's just trying to dance, and then he's in the crowd of people dancing, and he just walks out. Then he walks over to one of the guards, but then he like changes his mind and he goes back and he sits in a seat. And it's like nothing was said there, but you could tell like things are turning in his mind. He's like, maybe he's thinking, oh, is this a good opportunity to try to escape? He walks over, sees the guard, and he's like, oh no, just tries to play it off, goes back, sits down. And it's, oh man, he just completely embodies the character. Some of the fighting scenes were great, just stupid, silly. He just, one near the end, he gets the, he just has a bunch of black paint. He's just completely naked. He has the guy held hostage. And then he's like, all right, he's had enough as a hostage. Everybody come in, let's fight. And then we have the scene where he has the librarian in the prison. The librarian comes, brings him some books. And he's like, all right, you're my prisoner now. I have you captured. He calls up like the warden on the phone. He's like, all right, I need to get what I want. And then the warden's like, what do you want? He's like, well, what do you got to offer? And then eventually he gives up with it. He strips completely naked, gets the librarian to put some like oil on him, some butter, make him all slippery when he's fighting. And the movie is just so many great scenes. Like the movie, you would expect a movie about this crazy serial killer to be, I don't know, more gritty, which it is gritty, but more dirty, less flashy. But the movie it's a spectacle. Like I said, it's flashy, it's fun. The music choices work so well. Some of the weird synths, some of the pop music that's infused with it when there's some fighting scenes, and the music works so well. And the cinematography also was just awesome. Like, I don't want to say dreamlike, but it's very like trying to what's the word I'm looking? I was going to say like fantasticalize, trying to just demonstrate again the spectacle. And we have so many like of the side shots where we see the entire action from the side. It's very like linear, left to right. He's trying to get one way. Maybe he's fighting somebody trying to get another way. Just scenes of people walking when you have those wide side shots. They were great. A lot of slow motion. And then also just like, yeah, those scenes where we take a break in reality and we get to him standing on stage venting his feelings. There's that one where he has half of his face painted and he's talking to each of his characters like this. And then he turns and he has half of his face painted. He's like, oh, what are you going to do when you get out of prison? Oh, I'm going to do this, blah, blah, blah. That scene, it just went on for so long. And the acting is absolutely insane. It's just one continuous shot. And his presence is just absolutely magnificent. Like, it's just, this movie was just so fun to watch. So different from what I thought it would be. And I think just like the most entertaining version of this story possible. And that's the reason why it's really sticking out to me, because I feel like there's been so many like serial killer biopics where in this movie, he doesn't kill anybody. I'm pretty sure he kills nobody, but he's a criminal. And I mean, there's so many criminal biopics that are, they have a certain formula, but this just like absolutely breaks that formula. And it's a movie that's supposed to be fun. And I mean, there might be some like things about, portraying criminals and serial killers as like these stars in movies. And that can be a bit concerning. I mean, especially with like, Dahmer and everything like that. That's kind of just like blown up. And it's like, think about how like the victim's family feel. That's just insane. But this one is like, he never did kill anybody. I guess he was violent in prisons, but it just seems like the right story to tell with this much energy and this much fun. And man, I just can't say enough about Tom Hardy. The truth is oftentimes stranger than fiction. And I mean, yeah, this guy really was absolutely nuts. There's a lot of clips on YouTube of the real Charles Bronson and just how he goes about himself and his mustache in all of its glory. And yeah, I feel like that's really all I want to say about this movie. It's just a spectacle. It's just so much fun. I'm sure I missed a few like insane scenes that I really loved, but those were just the ones that came off the top of my head. But man, this movie was so fun. Highly, highly recommend watching it. And it is the craziness of him going through the prison system, treating it like a hotel, as he says. But then below the surface, there also is a few quiet moments. Like one moment where he gets out of prison, he goes back with his family, and then they drive him home, and then he can't open the door from the inside because he's been in prison for so long. And then the guy lets him out, and then he looks back at the car and he like tries to pull on it. It's like, oh, how does this work? It's just like there's a lot of small moments. There's a lot of detail to the movie, and it's just like Tom Hardy gave it his all. Like every single scene. I mean, he is in the entire movie, and every single scene with him in it, which is the entire movie. It's just so fun to watch him. So fun to watch him in every single scenario. You don't know what he's going to do. You're trying to figure out what he's thinking, what he's going to do. And he just absolutely kills it. Absolutely kills it. So, yeah, that's all I have to say. This movie was awesome. This movie was so fun. Highly, highly recommend. Bronson.